It's difficult. Of course, we know the way of the transgressor is hard, right? But Scripture tells us those who place their faith in the Lord, there's rivers of life. There is peace. And so God begins to make his case against Israel and say, really, wherein have I wearied thee? So you can almost hear the people's complaints about the commands of the Lord, about the acts of the Lord. And God is asking them, listen, how have I been a bad God? How have I caused you weariness? And then God begins through the voice of Micah. He begins to tell and recall all that he's done for his people. Look what he says in verse 4. He says, for I brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. I redeemed thee out of the house of servants. I sent before thee Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Here, God is recalling his past blessings. He is recalling all that he had done for the nation, all that he had done for them. And can I even so go so far as to use this to us, recalling all that God has done for us? It's a good thing for us to remember all that God has brought us through, all that he has led us through. And we look back, and in this case, he is recalling their time in Egypt, that they were servants, now they're free. He has redeemed them. He sent them leaders to guide them, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. That's a group of siblings, by the way. And he says, listen, I sent them to you. I have been nothing but good to you. I have been gracious to you. I have sent you redeemers and saviors and prophets and priests. I have sent you people to lead you like Miriam did, lead you in praise. I have been nothing but good. He says this also in verse 5, O my people, remember now what Balak, king of Moab, consulted. If you remember, the king of Moab, Balak, sought out Balaam, who was a seer. Okay, or he could offer condemnation, he could offer judgment, and so the king of Moab sought Balak to curse Israel. But in a dramatic turn of events, Balaam's curse actually turned into a blessing. God actually used Balaam's own words and turned them into a blessing. And so I think of this, and God is saying, listen, remember what Balak tried to do? Remember how he hired Balaam to speak against you, and I turned that curse into a blessing? And then he says, from Shittim unto Gilgal, those are both the encampments on either side of the Jordan River into the promised land. Shittim was the last encampment before the Jordan. Gilgal was the first encampment after Jordan into the promised land. That ye may know the righteousness of the Lord. So here God is presenting his case. He is saying, I've been nothing but good to you. And listen, has not God been good to us? Hasn't he been good to us? His faithfulness through all generations, how he worked. And I'll tell you, a few months ago when I realized that David's last day would be Nick's first day, I just sat in my office with little tears in my eyes thinking, who could have planned this? Who could have organized? Who could have orchestrated this? Only God. And here Micah is recalling just all that God has done. He is saying, listen, he has been so good to you. Part of the reason I was in this passage, of course, knowing what today was with David and Nick, but also this past week I was talking to our children, and they said something that was very encouraging. And they said, Dad, we listen to your sermons every week. I said, oh, man, that's so nice. They have their own churches, they have their own pastors, they have their own, I do my best to speak what the Lord has for me to speak, but hearing that's encouraging. They call us, hey, we listen to what your messages are, and we talk about it sometimes through the week. And one of the reasons I found myself in Micah 6:8 is because this is the theme verse for two of our kids are in camp this summer, and this is the theme passage for the camp. And this is their first Sunday at their first church, at their first week of camp. And so I thought this would be good, not just for us, but even for them, as they listen and, Lord willing, tune in this week. But this whole thing, God is presenting his case to the people, and he's saying, where have I been unrighteous? Where have I been unloving? I have guided you, I have led you, I have steered you right, I have brought you the people you need. And then the nation, through the voice of Micah, the nation replies in verses 6 and 7, very interesting. Listen to what the nation says. They say this, verse 6, wherewith shall I come before the Lord? and bow myself before the high God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves of a year old, which were highly precious? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sins of my soul? So here's the nation beginning to look at, how can we restore God's favor? How can we get it back? And unfortunately, they were looking at God's favor and the worship of God as transactionary. They were looking at it as a transaction to be completed rather than a life attitude to be pursued. They looked at it as a transaction. Now, when you read verses 6 and 7, you read, this is sort of hyperbole. Micah is speaking in excess to prove a point. And the people are basically saying, what thing can I do to earn God's favor? Now we know that Solomon, in other passages, Solomon offered sacrifices. He offered 120,000 animals one time. He offered 1,000 burnt offerings, Scripture says. And so what's happening in the nation, they are saying, okay, what can we do now to appease God's wrath, to show that we obey him? And they begin to offer these really over-the-top explanations. They say in verse 6, shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves of a year old, which were highly favored, which that was considered to be a great cost? Shall I come before him with calves? Or verse 7, will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams? Okay, so calves and rams, burnt offerings. Of course, this is not Micah ignoring the sacrificial system which God had instituted for them as a picture of the price for sin, because Micah himself would have been involved in sacrificial systems. But he's speaking in this idea. He's saying, it's not a number. Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000 rivers of oil, assumably olive oil, which is very precious? And then he begins to say even what God had condemned Israel to do. Shall I give my firstborn for my transgressions? Okay, of course, speaking of Baal worship, as they would offer their children on the altar of Baal. The fruit of my body for the sins of my soul. And so the people are pleading to God. They're saying, God, what can we do to earn your favor? What can I offer to you to make you proud, to restore the relationship? Now we know that it's not what we bring. We know it's what we cling to. We know that it is not the quantity, it is the heart's attitude behind it. Matter of fact, back in the book of 1 Samuel, you know this passage. You don't have to turn there, but in 1 Samuel chapter 15, some of you know the story of King Saul. God had instructed King Saul, I want you to kill the Amalekites. This is your first task as king. Your first battle you're facing is to destroy the Amalekites. And in an act of obedience, you are to utterly destroy them. Take no prisoners, take no cattle, destroy everything. Take no loot, do not ransack the place, utter destruction. Samuel tells Saul to do this. But of course, some of you know the story. Saul did not do this. Samuel came to ask how the battle went, and as he's talking to Saul, he hears cattle in the background. Did you obey God? He hears the rustling of animals and the mooing of the cows and the sheep, and he hears these things. And Saul, in his mind, said, listen, the people did it. They took it. As a matter of fact, we're now going to offer it to the Lord. 1 Samuel 15 verse 22, Samuel gets to the heart of the matter. He says this. He says, hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? He's saying, Saul, do you think the Lord is more happy with burnt sacrifices or with obedience? What is the Lord more pleased with?